Tom, John B. Allen, here we go. You know, it's a reality that I've accepted, that his name is John B. Allen and not just Mr. Ballen. But,
right.
You know, that's cool too. I mean, shit, my name is Chad. It could be worse, so.
It could be Karen, you know. I think right now that would be the worst name to have.
Or if your last name was Chad and your name was like
Karen, Chad.
Like, yeah, Karen. What's the other name that they use? Karen, Chad.
Kyle.
Kyle, yeah. Yeah, it
Chad,
could be
Kyle,
bad.
Chad, Kyle, Karen.
Or if it was Karen C. Kyle, and the middle name was Chad. Karen, Chad, Kyle.
Anyway, so Mr. Ballen's taking a spin on his name, and today we're watching This Girl Died Horrifically Twice.
Not once.
Sounds horrific. Sounds bad. I don't know what this is going to be. I'm not going to speculate because it always takes a turn that I don't expect. Yeah.
Also, I want to preface this with the fact that, you know, we got to take into some consideration that these are people that are going to be in this story. It's not just a made-up creepypasta.
Yeah.
In those situations,
you
who
never
knows
know
what's going to go on, man?
Yeah.
Whenever we're making assumptions about things and being critical of situations like the ones that Mr. John B. Allen talks about, we have to remember, in those circumstances, you never know what can happen, what you're going to do. You just don't know until you're there.
To share some stuff, went through a tragic incident, and you look back and you're like, why did I do that? Or like, what was I thinking? And whenever you go through something like that, I mean, your brain can't keep up with what's going on, and you're just in these moments, you're just surviving.
Right.
You know, you're not able to be logical. You're just doing your best. And so for us to sit here and break it down, we're thinking logically, we're not in survival mode.
Well, and we have this different view. We have a whole nother vantage point. We literally have a talented storyteller
telling us
breaking
what's
this down.
happening.
You know, so it's easy to make assumptions about things like that. So I just wanted to before we go into this, just be clear that whenever you're thinking about this stuff, you have to remember you're dealing with human beings going through really wild stuff that doesn't allow you the opportunity to think clearly. The people who can, like Mr. John B. Allen, who was a Navy SEAL, who trained for crazy amounts of time for things, you know, those people are exceptional human beings because they have the ability to kind of fight back against that urge to just react to whatever. They have trained reactions. So yeah, that's why those guys are so incredibly special and gifted.
For sure.
So yeah, let's check this video out. How, I guess we're going to find out how you can 2 times bite the dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2015, a young man living in Honduras made his way to the local cemetery, and he found his wife's gravesite, and he leaned up against it and he quietly began to cry. Seconds later, something would happen inside of that cemetery that would not only cause the young man to go silent, get up, and start running, but it would also be caught on camera. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to come to the zoo with you, and then cover them in honey and push them into the bear enclosure. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Dude, is this some fucking 1800s bullshit with the bells and...
I don't know.
Oh my god.
In the spring of 2021, 52-year-old Texas resident Karen Davis got married, and then after the ceremony and after the honeymoon, she went through the process of changing her last name from Davis to McBride to match her husband's last name. After the change was done, the last step was to get a new driver's license with the new name on it. So Karen emailed the local DMV, or Department of Motor Vehicles, to set up a time for her to come in and make the change to her license. But after she sent that email, the local DMV immediately emailed Karen back, and they told her that they could not help her with this request until she resolved an issue. Now, they didn't specify what this issue was.
Like the DMV.
However, they very cryptically said it had something to do with the state of Oklahoma. And then at the bottom of the email, there was just a phone number they told her she needed to call in order to resolve this issue. And so Karen's thinking, okay, that's pretty weird, but I did used to live in Oklahoma, so that probably has something to do with it. And so not thinking much of it, she punched this number the DMV had given her into her phone, and then she let it ring. A few moments later, much to Karen's shock, a woman from the Norman, Oklahoma District Attorney's Office picked up the phone and said, "How can I help you?" Karen immediately assumed that the DMV must have made a mistake, that maybe they were trying to give Karen some other number in Oklahoma because this was an Oklahoma problem, and they had mistakenly given her the number to the DA's office. But since she had this woman on the phone, Karen told her, hey, I was just trying to get a new license in Texas. They told me there was some sort of issue. It had to do with me potentially living in Oklahoma. I don't know what it is, but this is the number they gave me. So I'm sure it's a mistake, but that's why I'm calling. The woman from the DA's office had no idea who Karen was, but after taking down Karen's information and looking on her computer, she discovered Karen's so-called Oklahoma problem. And after she explained to Karen what this enormous problem was, Karen literally couldn't believe it. But after this woman went over the details a few more times and really showed Karen that this Oklahoma problem was very, very real, suddenly everything in Karen's life made sense. For the last 22 years, Karen, who was incredibly smart and friendly and polite and never had a problem with anyone, had an incredibly hard time getting a job. Even jobs that she was extremely qualified for, she would get turned down for someone who was way less qualified. And then in the rare times that Karen did actually get hired, she would always get fired for no reason. And so Karen never understood why she was being treated this way until now. It would turn out 22 years earlier, which is when Karen's hireability issues began, she lived in Norman, Oklahoma, which is where the DA's office was that she would end up calling 22 years later. And when she was living in Norman, she lived with a roommate. And this roommate was this nice young man who had a couple of young kids. And one weekend, he went to the local movie store called Movie Place, and he rented the hit 90s movie, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, to watch with his kids. And after he was done watching this movie, he didn't return the VHS tape of Sabrina the Teenage Witch back to Movie Place. Now, normally when this happened, the movie store would just hit the card holder with lots of late fees, which was actually great for the movie store. They made lots and lots of money on individual people that just forgot to return their movies. And if the card holder just continued to hold on to this delinquent movie, at some point the movie store would just hit them with a final fee that basically accounted for the total cost of the VHS tape that they had effectively stolen. And then at that point, the matter was resolved. The card holder owned the VHS tape, whether they knew it or not, and the movie store simply moved on. But in this case, Movie Place in Norman, Oklahoma didn't think that was enough. And when Sabrina the Teenage Witch was not returned in a timely fashion, they pressed charges against the card holder. And the card holder was Karen Davis. The roommate had just borrowed her card. And somehow, these charges against Karen were never brought up to Karen. She was never contacted by anyone. And so for 22 years, she was technically a wanted felon. Meaning, every time one of her employers, either during the interview process or after she was hired, when they would run a criminal background check on her, it would pop up she was wanted for felony embezzlement. And so this was the reason she kept not getting jobs and kept getting fired from jobs. Since discovering these charges, Karen worked with the Norman, Oklahoma DA's office and got these charges dismissed.
Jeez. Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
You know what really
Man.
makes me want to slap the like button with a tasseled wobble gong? Inflation. Prices are going through the roof right now, which is why I'm excited to partner with Current again. So thank you to Current for sponsoring today's video. Also, stick around to the end of this sponsored segment because I'm going to be sharing the best like button gags you all sent me a couple of weeks ago on Current during our last cash giveaway. Current is the mobile banking app that, unlike boring old banks, they actually help you take control of your money, which is more crucial than ever right now. Old banks, just like the like button, they just charge you fees and slow you down. But with Current, there are no monthly fees, and the app is super easy to use. And while other banks earn you basically nothing on your savings, with Current, you can earn over 40 times the national average. Because of the strain inflation is having on all of us, Current and I are giving away $2,500 to you all. For a chance to win part of the $2,500 giveaway, all you have to do is click the link down below, download Current, and then use my code BALLEN250. And now here are the top 5 like button gags we received. My favorite was from Regina. Please invite the like button to the zoo with you, and then cover them in honey, and then accidentally push them into the bear enclosure. Okay, back to the stories. In the early evening hours of December 24th, 2011, so Christmas Eve, 26-year-old Zazel Preston sat on her bed in her little apartment in Anaheim, California, and wrapped Christmas gifts for her children. Laying next to her was her newest addition to the family, her third child, a 7-week-old little boy. This Christmas was a big deal for Zazel. It was also a big deal for her husband, 30-year-old William Wallace, not only because it was going to be the first Christmas with their new son, but also because this was the first Christmas after Zazel and William had reconciled their relationship. They had been married for the past 3 years.
I never do this. Those were the shoes that I had in high school, and I've never been able to explain them to anyone.
You talking about
her shoes? I had those
shoes?
Yes. They were high tops and you could fold them down and they were pink on the inside. Sorry.
Vans?
Yeah, I had like the most redneck dude in high school who was like 21 because he like still hadn't graduated, like tried to buy those shoes off of me. And I'm like, dude, your foot will not fit in these. But anyway.
Wow.
I've just never seen anybody else have those.
Well, there you go.
Anyway.
This is probably a shit place to spot those out.
Maybe everything's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe everything's okay.
Well,
they have a great Christmas, and we'll see.
All right.
And William had reconciled their relationship. They had been married for the past 3 years, but over those 3 years, their relationship had been very unhealthy and toxic and at times abusive. But earlier that year, when Zazel had discovered that she was pregnant, this baby became kind of like a new anchor point for their relationship. It was like suddenly they could put their differences aside and just focus on raising their kids together. After wrapping her final present, Zazel hopped off the bed, she scooped up her little boy, and then she headed out into the living room where she met up with her husband and her 2 older children, who were little girls aged 3 and 8, and then they all headed outside and went next door to celebrate Christmas Eve at a party with their neighbors. Early the next morning, so on Christmas Day, Zazel's 2 oldest children, the 2 girls, they got up early and they rushed out of their bedrooms and they ran down the hallway into the living room where their parents were waiting for them on the couch along with their baby brother. The living room was completely decked out with Christmas decorations that the family had put up over the past couple of weeks. The Christmas tree was in the corner with bright multicolored lights and ornaments all over it. There were wreaths on the wall and other string lights around the top of the room. And then over their fireplace were all of their stockings nailed up, stuffed with goodies. The little girls squealed with delight and ran around the couch and took up spots right underneath the Christmas tree, and they grabbed their first present and they turned and looked at their parents on the couch and they saw their dad kind of give them a nod of approval, which meant, okay, you can start opening your gifts. And so the girls happily began tearing into the festive wrapping, and then after each of them had their brand new toy in hand, they turned around reflexively to show their parents. And so William, he sees the toys and he says, oh, they're so "Oh, great, guys." And then when the girls, they look at their mother and they show her the toys, she doesn't even react. She completely ignores them. And so at some point, these little kids, they start yelling for their mom, "Hey, Mom, check it out. Look at this new toy." But Zazelle just sits there. She doesn't say a word. She's just sitting back on the couch, completely ignoring them. Finally, the 8-year-old turns to William and says, "What's wrong with Mommy?" And at this point, William pauses, and then he gives Zazelle a scathing look before very bluntly saying to these young kids, "Mommy got drunk, and now she's ruined Christmas." The girls knew from William's tone of voice that their parents must be fighting, and so they did what they normally did when this happened, and that was to just try to ignore it. And so the little girls, they turned away from their parents and began opening more presents, doing their best not to disturb their parents, who were sitting silently behind them. And then, a little after 9 a.m., after most of the presents had been opened, William abruptly stood up and walked into the other room and placed a phone call. And then, a few minutes later, there was a loud knock on the front door. The night before, after Zazelle and William and their kids had left their neighbor's party and come back to their apartment, Zazelle and William had gotten into a vicious fight. And by the time the kids had all gone to bed, the fight between the parents had become very physical. Neighbors would recall late at night on Christmas Eve hearing this very loud commotion coming from Zazelle and William's apartment. And at some point, apparently Zazelle had tried to run out of the apartment, but William had chased after her and hauled her back inside. The sounds coming from their apartment would eventually stop somewhere in the wee hours of Christmas Day. And then as the sun came up on Christmas Day, Zazelle and William had made their way to the couch, and they were sitting there with their 7-week-old baby, waiting for their 2 oldest to wake up and come open presents. Except when their 2 little girls came out of their bedrooms and bombed into the living room to begin celebrating, only William was alive. Zazelle had been beaten to death by William. And after he had beaten her to death the night before, he had dragged her into the living room, set her up on the couch to make it look like she was sitting, and then put sunglasses on her eyes in order to trick the children. And so all morning, as this 3-year-old and 8-year-old are opening these gifts and turning and showing their mother with excitement, she was dead the whole time. But at around 9 a.m., William realized his charade was not going to last because his kids were really keyed in to there being something wrong with their mother. And so that was when he got up and he called 911 and he told them that his wife had gotten drunk and fallen into a glass coffee table, and so she was hurt. And so a little bit later, the police and paramedics, they arrive, they go inside, and right away they can tell William is lying to them. There's more to this story than they're being told. And so ultimately, William would be convicted of second-degree murder, and he would be sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. As for Zazelle's 3 children, they are now being looked after by her parents.
At least there's that. But
those kids, man, how fucked.
How do you live with that?
In August of 2015, 16-year-old Nacy Perez suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. As she lay there scanning around the dark, tiny room that she was in, it dawned on her that the most likely reason she had just woken up is because she really needed to use the bathroom. And so she climbed out of her bed and she began carefully walking across the room where her other relatives were sleeping on the floor as she moved towards the back of the house. Nacy lived in a town called La Entrada, which is located in one of the poorest and most dangerous countries in the world, Honduras. But despite the harshness of her reality, Nacy was pretty happy. She had recently married the boy she was in love with. His name was Rudy, and the 2 of them were both very excited about their first child, which was due in a matter of months. So Nacy reached the back of her house, she pushed open the back door, and she stepped out into the hot night air, and then she made the familiar walk across her backyard toward the outhouse. But Nacy would never reach the outhouse. The next morning, Nacy's mother woke up first. Her name was Maria, and as she passed by the back door, she looked outside and she saw Nacy lying on the ground. And so Maria, she screams, she runs outside to her daughter, and she flips her over and she's looking at her, and Nacy is unresponsive and she's foaming at the mouth. Now, they're in a part of the world where healthcare was not top-notch, not even close. And Honduras is known for being an extremely religious part of the world. And so Maria did not think, oh, I should send my daughter to the hospital or I should call a doctor. Instead, Maria and the rest of Nacy's family, who had all streamed outside because of the commotion, they decided to call a priest to perform an exorcism because the belief was Nacy must be possessed with demons. And so a priest was hailed to the residence, and the priest would perform an exorcism on Nacy, but it wouldn't do anything. And so at that point, Maria and the rest of Nacy's family would take Nacy, who was still totally unresponsive and foaming, to the local hospital.
Okay.
But by that point, it was too late. Nacy was dead. When Nacy's family asked the doctors what happened to her, they said they didn't know. And so, heartbroken and confused, Maria and the rest of Nacy's family brought Nacy back home. They had an ad hoc memorial service, and then they buried her. The following day, Nacy's husband, Rudy, who was totally distraught because he has not only lost his wife, he's also lost his unborn child. He got up early and he just had to go to the cemetery to be with his wife. And so he made his way over to the local cemetery and he found his wife's gravesite. Nacy had not been buried under the earth. Instead, she had been placed into a coffin, and that coffin had been slid into this big hollowed out cement block that was as big as a coffin. And then once the coffin was slid inside, they walled up the opening. So basically her gravesite was this kind of freestanding big cement block. And so Rudy finds Nacy's cement block, and he goes up right next to it, and he leans up against it, and he begins to quietly sob. But just seconds later, he would hear something in that cemetery that would cause him to go completely silent, stand up, and sprint away.
Dude,
the day before, approximately
alive.
1 or 2 hours after Nacy's coffin was slid inside of that cement tomb and walled up, Nacy woke up. She was never dead. It's unclear what originally caused Nacy to collapse outside of her house on the way to the outhouse, but the two leading theories are, 1, she had a severe panic attack caused by a nearby gunshot, or 2, she had a severe episode of cataplexy. Cataplexy is the sudden, uncontrollable loss of muscle function, often brought on by very strong emotions. A mild case could be just having your knees buckle for a second. A severe case, which is what they believe could have happened to Nacy, would result in basically complete paralysis. But whatever the case was, the doctors at the hospital got it wrong. When Nacy was brought to them, she was not dead. And so when she woke up inside of her coffin that was encased in cement, she began shrieking and trying to pound up against the inside of these tight walls that were pressed up against her. And at some point, she even managed to force her hands up near her head, and she shattered the glass window that sat in her coffin that looked right down at her face. She broke the glass, but it didn't help her at all because, again, it's just cement on the other side. And so glass shards fell into her mouth and into her eyes. And so she stayed like that, screaming and trying to fight her way out for over 24 hours, trying to get anybody's attention, but nobody heard her. Until her husband, Rudy, he leaned up against her tomb and he put his ear right up against the cement and began to cry. And that's when he heard, through the cement, the sound of his wife calling out for help. Rudy instantly ran and got help, and he and his family came back, and they broke open the side of this tomb, and they pulled Nacy's coffin out, and even though she was now unresponsive, she had a faint heartbeat, and so they rushed her to the hospital, but by the time she got there, she really had died. Nacy had finally just run out of oxygen, likely within minutes of her husband finally hearing her screams.
Damn, dude.
So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please invite the like button to come to the zoo with you and then cover them in honey and push them into the bear enclosure. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss our weekly upload. We now have a podcast called the Mr. Ballen Podcast that puts out brand new, never before heard podcast exclusive stories on Monday mornings. And then on Thursdays, we put out the remastered audio from our best YouTube videos. Again, it's called the Mr. Ballen Podcast, and you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Google. Basically, anywhere you get podcasts, you can find this one. We also have 2 additional YouTube channels. One is called Mr. Ballen Shorts, and the other is called Mr. Ballen en Español. We post near daily content on our Snapchat and Facebook pages. Those are both just called Mr. Ballen. If you want to get in touch with me, please follow me on any major social media platform. My username username on all accounts is @mrballen, and I really do read the majority of my DMs. We also have some really cool merchandise, so head on over to shopmrballen.com to have a look. And if you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called Mr. Ballen. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, other YouTube channels, the podcast, wherever, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.
That is so fucking wrecked.
Dude, the first one was just like, what the fuck,
Can't
man?
even remember
the Blockbuster shit, or not Blockbuster, but the movie Sabrina the Teenage Witch was a felony for 20 years on this woman's record.
Like, I remember being a kid and, like, not returning my, like, books or movies or whatever to the library. And then my mom would be like, where's it at? I'm like, I don't know, lost it. And then, like, you have to go through all that. And then you get a big fine. And, like, we always somehow had a library fine.
Always,
And so, like, you felt like a criminal walking into the library. That is insane. I feel so bad for her because she couldn't get a job.
It fucked her life up for so long. Yeah,
that's crazy.
You would think you would do some kind of investigation or ask somebody like,
or
why
like
are
whenever
you firing me?
she would get like her driver's license changed, they usually,
if you're a felon,
or
dude,
the place would contact you. It's like, geez, but the
second one, the guy set his wife up when he
totally
said,
fucking wrecked.
Dude, that guy, I mean, you have to have like a serious mental issue. Like, you have no empathy.
How could you do that to your children?
He was thinking about, how am I going to fool everybody so that I don't get in trouble? It was all me.
Mommy got drunk. No, you murdered her.
Well, she may have been drunk when you murdered her.
And then, then ruined Christmas. You murdered your wife, stuck sunglasses on her, propped her up like some movie prop.
Yeah.
And then expected your kids to be so stupid they wouldn't notice something was wrong.
One of the kids was weeks old at the time.
7 weeks old.
That one kid. So yeah, what a piece of trash. That's the thing. That once, for me, if I'm laying down a sentence for a crime like that, as soon as you decide that not calling 911 is on the table for you, you have decided and thought about and murdered somebody.
Yeah.
If he would have knocked her down in a fight or whatever, yeah, he's a wife beater. He's still a piece of shit for doing that.
No, I mean,
but
even
that doesn't
if
make you a murderer.
Even if he technically, like, if he hit her, and let's say he didn't mean to
kill her, but she fell down and hit her head.
She hit her head or
and
twisted her neck.
And then he calls 911.
He still did it.
Yeah.
But he at least didn't do all of the other stuff.
No, I'm talking about from, like, if I'm trying to figure out what should happen with this guy, I'm thinking, I'm thinking, not only did he do something that
took away her life,
led to what killed her, but who's to say, had she gotten medical attention in time, that she could have lived? Who knows? Like, not getting that opportunity means it's not manslaughter. You killed, so it's first degree murder at that point.
Yeah.
I think, didn't they say he got manslaughter? It was like 15 years to life. There should be no possibility for him
I don't know what they said,
to get out of this. There should be no.
It wasn't an accident. It wasn't this altercation led to just a tragedy. It wasn't.
When you decide, I'm not going to get her help.
Yeah.
Then you are a murderer at that point.
Yeah.
You know, because that's a decision in and of itself.
And then to be so sick and twisted.
To prop and display the body for the kids.
Like, I just need to understand, and this might be going along with the thing at the beginning where we were like, logically, it doesn't make sense. What was his plan?
Oh, well, there was going to be some way to figure it out. It was in situations like this, I think that, you know, when you're going through all that stuff you know, like I was saying in the beginning, you got to think about the craziness and the chaos of the situation.
I'm only thinking about it from somebody who, like, wouldn't ever fucking do that.
It's a self-preservation
but
thing.
Like, I guess if you were like, oh, fuck, I murdered him, I have to fix it, and then my kids...
There was no fix it. It was, I'm buying time so I can figure out what to do so that I can get out of this, so I can get away with
I think
this.
I would have said, Mommy's really sick and just don't go in her room.
But again, it's like in the moment, in the middle of the crazy.
I don't know.
To be in that situation, you know, he had to have been a pretty wild guy anyway.
Yeah.
So he was thinking, you know, how do I get away with this?
Yeah.
The kids are going to find out if she's not here.
I feel so bad.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah.
I'm glad that the kids were able to go with her mom and not to be split up into a foster care situation.
That's the thing that I just kept thinking about, man. Those kids,
know
the reality of that whenever you grow up and you realize Christmas will be fucked up forever.
For the rest of your life.
Dude.
Like, that's so sick.
Well, the baby probably has the best chance. The ones who literally saw her.
An 8-year-old?
Once you know, like, once you're old enough to know that that's what that was, fuck, dude.
That's so traumatic.
Oh, it's horrific. And that's the kind of shit that's going through my head when I'm thinking about, nah, dude, it's not manslaughter. This guy murdered this woman and displayed her dead body in front of her kids on Christmas morning. Yeah, but what does that matter to him? You know, what does that...
It's not just her kids, because you can, sadly, and stats go with this, you can separate that. You're not responsible. Those aren't my kids. Like, that's how people, unfortunately, some, not all, think.
Yeah.
But if it's biologically your kid, like, that's your kid. It's not just...
Yeah, but whenever you don't... If he cared or had it within him to give a shit about anything
that's what I'm saying.
That,
if he did...
He didn't.
I don't know.
So, yeah, that was the most jacked up one as far as the normal way that Mr. Ballen stuff goes.
Yeah.
The last one was just horrific on every level. I mean, you have... a lot of good things, you know, that certain churches do as far as, like, donating money and feeding, you know, homeless people. That good does exist. But the extreme situation where religion is the first priority in lieu of medical attention is sad. It's been something that jacked up my family, too. Like, I've had family members who didn't seek enough help because of religious reasons, and it's unbelievable. But in a country like that, where even when you go to the hospital, their hands are up in the air and they're like, I don't know. It's just like, dude, this wasn't so far off from what we could have lived through had we been born a couple of generations back in our situation. Yeah. I mean, there's horrible stories about, things that were done to alleviate pressure in your head and things, like just drilling a straight up hole in your skull and people getting infections and shit.
I felt really, really bad whenever they were like, oh, they didn't get her medical attention. They, use their religion. And I felt bad because I know that they're trying to do what they think is best.
Nobody is in this like out to hurt this woman, obviously.
It's not like a medical negligent thing.
But in her state,
it is.
In her state, she's just at the whim of whatever.
And so I felt even worse whenever she got to a place where people are supposed to be able to help her and they declared her dead. Now, I don't understand. Even if you have the, what do you call it, cataplexy, you still would have a heartbeat, right?
You
still would have brain function. Wouldn't you check those things before you declared someone medically dead?
I've heard of these things happening before. And people literally digging themselves up out of the ground.
Well,
there's one story I heard where this guy was supposed to be dead. They buried him, and he like crawled his way out of his grave to be seen as like a demon or whatever, and they killed him. Yeah, because he got out of his...
Actually, there's a podcast, and I cannot remember. It's like, is it Grimm? It's a one word podcast, and they tell historical events of like why people believe certain things.
Yeah.
And I think it was like vampires for this one. Back when we didn't have a dishwasher, I would just listen to these podcasts. And it was like back, I guess, like the 1800s.
Yeah.
You know the stories about how they would accidentally bury somebody who was alive, and then so they eventually started putting little bells in. And if you were alive, you just rang the bell and they came over and got you. But that's where the thought, one of the thoughts of where vampires came from history is because, it's the undead. And it's like, no, you literally just don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and you said that someone was dead and they weren't dead.
Mm-hmm.
But people were in hysteria and thought that they were like
vampires coming back.
But that's where one of those thoughts originated from. If it was vampires. Grim? I can't remember the name of that. But anyway, this shit's whack. I feel so bad for her family and her husband. Yeah. Could you imagine how traumatic it would be to come grieve the loss of me?
And then think
I'm
hope.
Screaming. No, not even think there's hope.
I gotta save her.
You gotta save her.
She is okay.
And then you go take me. Just kidding. That's even worse.
Or to suffocate inside of concrete while you're eating broken glass in your face and your mouth and just your eyes and
what a traumatic thing that she had to experience, and him,
who deserves
and her family. And yet here this dude is propping his wife up, and then just gets 15 years.
15 years. I mean, there's a lot of things to be said about how the court system values certain people's lives, and that to me is a prime example of some just horrendous stuff. What are we doing here? What are we doing where the guy who props up a dead woman who he murdered in front of kids on Christmas gets 15 years to life? Maybe there was possibility of parole. And
then we just watched the West Memphis 3, who those kids did nothing, and they were in there for 17 years.
I know, but
so yeah,
So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on.
Nothing really makes sense.
My best friend is, he's a legal professional, and he has helped me see how complicated this shit is, because it has to be. Everything has no choice in such a huge system but to be just batshit insane, to where you have to go to school for 10 years to understand it. And it really sucks when it comes down to this kind of stuff, especially with that situation. And all I know is, man, we got to take care of each other, look after each other. And when stuff does go sideways for somebody that you love and care about, just know, man, you got to be there for them, because it could be you at any time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Mr. Ballen once again telling us about some crazy shit that we didn't know about.
Yeah.
Probably sometimes maybe wish we didn't know about.
It puts things into perspective.
Yeah, it does. It does. Makes me very grateful, not only for you, but also you guys. Thank you guys for watching this reaction. And if you enjoyed our reaction, you could always, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, even give us some recommendations of things you would like for us to react to in the future.
Yes, you can do that in the comments below on our Discord, or if you are a patron on our Patreon, you can leave it in the comments there or message us.
It's pretty cool. We also live stream every Monday and Thursday evening at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun.
We do. We have had some challenges go down.
Some really gross challenges.
Everything from black licorice to flavored crickets. Yeah. So, and Bean Boozled. That's Nikki's favorite. She loves the Bean Boozled challenge. And we also do live stream reactions on
Yes.
Thursdays at around 2 o'clock, 2 p.m.
Twitch
Eastern
exclusive.
Standard Time. Those are Twitch exclusive. We will do the reactions there, record those reactions, and we will edit those for YouTube, like the one you're watching now. So if you want to be a part of that, you know, we give shout outs and everything in our videos for people watching and things like that. So it could be you.
Yeah.
Join us. But for this one, I think that's going to do it.
See you guys.